911 Carrera values topped during the summer and are now on their way down. This market turn shook up the price trends and their thoughts. And now that we're a few months into the new market situation, we can see that some cars are dropping way quicker than others. 996.2 base prices are, for example, down by only 1.4%, while 991.1S's did not drop at all. 997.1s on the other hand are down by 8.6%, and also 992S's dropped by 7.7%. In other words, the 911 market broke into several pieces. In this video you'll get to know which models lost the least and which the most. We'll start with a quick 911 market overview before diving into the price trends. Over here we have the US market of November split by generation, excluding the Targas. I'm sure that this graph has no surprises for you if you are a 911 fan. In total there are 1,465 cars listed for sale, and we can see that you need to bring at least $20,000 if you want to roll in a 911. We can also see the by now familiar price patterns. 992s are obviously the most expensive, but the youngest 991.2s are not far behind. 991.1s on the other hand are priced significantly lower than the .2s. Prices are more in line with the 997.2. The 991s are a bit on their own, but prices show more similarities to the 996.2s than to the 997.2s. Finally, we arrive at the 996 generation, and over here we can see that the median prices per model year are fairly similar. After that quick market overview, it's time to have a look at the price trends. We'll start with the 996 and work our way up to the 992 market. Each of the markets will be classified as strong or weak, and at the end of the video I will summarize everything so that we have an overview of the cars that are performing the best and the cars that are performing the worst. Over here we have the price trends for the 996 market, split by the 996.1 base, 996.2 base and 996.2S. And the latter category of course only contains the 4S's, I just didn't add the drive configuration split to the data. Starting at the bottom, we can see that the 996.1 base models came down by 3.7%, but that the price trend has been exceptionally stable during the last 12 months. Compared to last year, prices are down by only 3.2%, and this change is not fully statistically confirmed, so it could be the result of chance. The drop is visible in the complete market, but it's mainly driven by the cars with less than 50,000 miles. Moving up a bit to the 996.2 base model, we can see that prices came down by 1.4% during the last 3 months, but that they are still up by 1.4% compared to last year. Now finally we have the 4S's. Prices are up by 8.8%, but this is not a real price increase. The current market has a median mileage of 49,000 miles, whereas this was 63,000 miles 3 months ago. The price increase over here is then also a reflection of the mileage change. 1 year ago though, the median mileage was 52,000 miles, so we can use that point as a comparison. And this comparison shows that prices are still up by 2.1%. Now looking at the 996 market, we can see that the price changes are relatively small. Some cars increased a bit in value while others decreased a bit. But none of these price changes are statistically confirmed, and this means that they could be the result of chance, or to put it in other words, the result of normal market fluctuations. Now if we are going to rate these developments, it is important to know what we are going to rate them against. What is our framework? In my Q3 market update I showed you that the car market turned, and that most modern sports and supercars are down by 1 to 3%, and another slightly smaller group by 4 to 7%. There are also some outliers that saw prices decrease by more than 7%. So against this background, I think it is fair to conclude that the price trends in the 996 market are relatively strong. Prices hardly moved, and that's a good thing in the current environment. In my previous market update we also discussed that these cars are turning into collectibles, supply is trending down, and the average condition of the cars that are for sale is increasing. And this of course helps to support the prices. To my surprise though, things are not so great in the 997 market. Let me show you. We'll start with the 997.1 market. Over here we have the base and the S models, and these trends only include the two-wheel driven variants. We can see that the base models are down by 4.8% compared to 3 months ago, and that this is 7% for the S models. By themselves these numbers are not shockingly high, but given the time frame of only 3 months, I think they are on the high side. Compared to the market of May, prices even decreased by 5.5 and 8.6%. And these numbers are significantly higher than what we saw in the 996 market. So even though that the year-on-year change is with 2.8% not that large in the base market, the short-term trends are clearly weaker than in the 996 market. And this pattern is similar to what we can see in the 997.2 market. If we start with the base and the S models, we can see that prices decreased by 7.7 and 5% during the last 3 months, and those are significant numbers. Looking at the 12-month change, we can see that this is minus 4.9% for the base models and minus 0.2% for the S models. And especially the base market sticks out here. 4.9% is on the high side. Now the GTS market is a bit more tricky to analyze due to its limited supply. Prices decreased by 5.9% during the last 3 months, and this is in line with the rest of the 997.2 market. However, we can see that the confidence interval increased, and this shows that there is more price variation and that the top end of the market expanded more than that the bottom end dropped. So if we combine our observations from the 997.1 and the 997.2 markets, it's only fair to conclude that especially the short-term trends are relatively weak. Prices decreased by 4 to 8%, and in many cases these drops brought the prices back down to or below the levels of 1 year ago. And with that, it's time to have a look at the 911 market. But before we do so, if you enjoyed this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Thank you. Over here we have the price trends for the base, S and GTS models. If we start again with the base and the S models, we can see that prices were stable during the last 3 months. Base models came down by 1.2% and S models did not change. And this also applies to the long-term trend. Compared to August 21, base models are down by 1.2% and S models by 0.4%. Or in other words, prices hardly moved. The GTS market, again, deserves a separate mention. Due to the low supply levels, it is more difficult to get a reliable estimate on the price changes. Prices dropped by 1.5% during the last 3 months, and compared to August 21, this is 6.1%. The latter number seems a bit on the high side given the changes in the base and the S market. Overall though, I think that the 991.1 segment displays a strong performance. We can see that prices came down from the market top, but the drops are limited to 1 or 2% and hereby smaller than for example in the 997 market. But we cannot say the same about the 991.2 market. Let's have a look. Over here we have the prices for the base, S, T and GTS models. If we start again with the base and the S models, we can see that prices decreased by 4% and 2.9%. Compared to the market top of last summer, this equals a drop of 8.2 and 4.8%. Prices for both models are then also lower than 1 year ago. Another thing that's interesting to mention but not visible in this graph is the drop in market supply for the 991.2 base models. Last February there were 173 cars listed for sale, while this is 110 cars now. The supply trend is then also pointing down. Prices also came down in the T and GTS market, but as we discussed before, these are markets with relatively low supply levels, so the price trends fluctuate a bit more. Now just by inspecting the trends visually, we can see that the T's price trend roughly follows the one of the S's. With 4%, the price change compared to August of last year is then also similar. The long-term trend in the GTS market is slightly stronger as prices came down by only 1.8%. Now aggregating all of this, we can say that prices in the 991.2 market came down more than in the 991.1 market. Prices in the .2 market decreased by 4 to 8%, while this is only 1 to 2% in the .1 market. And these differences you can also see visually. Over here I included the 991.1 and 991.2 markets, and you can clearly see that prices in the .2 market came down more than in the .1 market. Unfortunately, it is difficult to dissect from the data why we can see this price divergence. The .1 is often praised for its naturally aspirated engine, but it is difficult to say if this drives the price divergence over here. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And with that, it's time to have a look at the last generation, the 992. Over here we have the price development for the Carrera 2S split by model type and by roof type. Just as in the rest of the market, the price trend turned. The coupes and cabriolets in the base market are down by 6.1 and 5.1% relative to their market top of May. Compared to August 2022, prices are approximately the same. Looking at the S market, we can see that prices are down by 7.6% in the coupe market and by 6.9% in the cabriolet market. A comparison to last year wouldn't be completely fair, since there were only a few S models for sale back then. Looking at the GTS market, I again need to warn you that supply is very low over here, and that this of course affects the price trend. There are currently only 11 cars listed for sale, and based on this limited sample, prices appear to be coming down at a rapid pace. Compared to May, prices are down by approximately 16%, though this is probably a slight exaggeration. Now summing up the 9 and 2 market, we can see that compared to last year, prices held up quite well. However, the short-term trends show an increase in the decrease rate. We can see a clear top followed by a decline, and hereby the price trend shows more weakness than, let's say, the one in the 9 and 1.1 market. And with that, it's time to wrap up and conclude. We saw that 911 prices increased during the pandemic and topped during last summer. Now that prices are decreasing, we can see that there are differences in the decrease rate. We can see that prices are approximately the same as 1 year ago and that the short-term trends are sloping down slightly. Expressing this numerically, we are looking at drops between roughly 0 and 3%. 991.2s and 992s are showing larger decreases and hereby a weaker performance. Compared to 1 year ago, the price decreases are not that large, if any. It is the decrease from the market top that is larger in these markets than in the 996 and 991.1 market. Prices are down by 4 to 9%. For some cars like the 991.2s, this could perhaps be expected. After all, they are relatively new and therefore still subject to a traditional depreciation effect. For the 992, one could perhaps also expect this, but maybe to a lesser extent due to the supply constraints. For me though, the real surprise is the 997. They are indeed relatively expensive for their age, but especially the Dot 2 is frequently named as one of the best modern 911s. I do then also want to highlight a few things before we end this video. First, the fact that we can see that some cars are coming down more than others does not mean that they will continue to decrease more in the future. All of these price trends are heavily correlated, so given that the market only just stopped, it could be the result of chance. Personally, I wouldn't panic if I owned a car that has a weaker price trend. Prices are after all still far above pre-pandemic levels. Moreover, going forward, I think it's fair to expect further price decreases. Second, the fact that I point out that prices for some cars decreased more than others has absolutely nothing to do with my personal preference for any of these cars. I'm just trying to give you a complete and balanced picture of what's happening in the market. And I always do my best to present the data in such a way that it gives the best description of what's actually happening and highlight any issues that there might be. Now finally, fourth, and then I will stop this ramble, the fact that I covered the complete 911 Carrera 2 market means that some subtle differences in the price trends are not shown. If I split every trend between, for example, the manual and automatics, the all-wheel drive and two-wheel drive cars, the coupe and the convertibles, and all possible combinations, I need to spend too long explaining the differences in the price trends. They fluctuate much more because supply decreases at every split that you add to the data. Having said that, I asked you on my YouTube channel what you would like to see featured in this video, and I think I covered most of your requests. Perhaps I'll make a video for each generation, but in a simpler format, but I need to figure out some logistical issues before I can do that. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now as always, if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car markets, but would have liked to see an analysis for a different car, let me know the name of the car down below by commenting it in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. Also don't forget to subscribe and to click on the notification bell so you get notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.